For the first few years of my gender exploration, I felt very impacted by the mainstream conversation about gender. And since at the time I didn't feel very established in my own understanding of gender, I guess I was sort of searching for a feeling of recognition or validation from the so called experts in the space. And so for a while, I was stuck in this wishy washy place where I was being energetically and emotionally pulled into the drama of what everybody else had to say about gender. And it got so debilitating that one day I just was like, okay, I am totally fed up with this. And so in that moment, I just spontaneously made a commitment that I was going to find out for myself. And I didn't quite know what that meant. Like, I didn't know what I was going to find out. But in my heart, I just knew that I was done searching for gender outside of myself. And so in the coming months, I found myself just intuitively turning away from the world. And instead of looking for gender freedom out there, I shifted my gaze and I began looking for it in here. And in order for me to do that, I had to stop listening to the experts, right? I had to stop caring about the science and I had to stop participating in debates. And really, I just had to let go of the whole project. And so that's what I did. And then in the midst of all that letting go, something really incredible happened. So one day, out of nowhere, I had a question enter into my heart. But before I give you that question, I just need to quickly give you some context about the path of inquiry, which is how I'm suggesting that you should engage with this question. So if you've been dabbling in spirituality for more than a few minutes, then I'm sure you've come across the great spiritual question, which asks, who am I? Now, that's not the question I'm going to be passing to you, but this is an excellent example of how the spiritual inquiry process works. So what you do is you sit there in quiet contemplation and you ask yourself, who am I? And then instead of trying to answer it, you just relax into the question. You sort of give yourself over to that process. And as the mind presents you with all sorts of fascinating ideas, which it will, you just slip past them and you sink deeper and deeper into this question or into this inquiry. And you do this with the intention of traveling through the portal which the question has created and into the reality which the question is pointing to. And so that's a great example of how the inquiry process works. The question and the vacuum which it creates pulls you into itself. So please just recognize that when I give you this question, I'm not actually saying, hey, what's the answer to this? And I'm not even implying that there is an answer. But instead, I'm saying, here, use this question as a tool in order to find greater clarity about your gender situation. All right, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get into the question. So the question is, what is the truth of gender? So let's take a moment to consider this. What is the truth of gender? Now, I don't mean what do you think the truth is? And I don't mean what's an opinion about the truth. No, I mean what's the fundamental, universal, all-pervasive truth of gender according to reality. Now, as we already talked about, your job right now isn't to come up with an answer, but instead it's to place yourself inside of the question and surrender into the emptiness which it creates. And then every time that your mind presents you with an answer, you just slip past the thought and you sink deeper and deeper into the question. And so that's how your gender inquiry process can work. That's how you, the trans person, can experience greater freedom and clarity regarding your gender situation. And just to give you context as to what this process might look like, so for me, I sat with this question pretty much every day for at least a year. And so before long, as this question is just eating at me, it became so existential and all consuming that it had just completely taken over my life. And before I knew it, the only thing in the entire world that I cared about was experiencing the truth of gender. And I emphasize the word experiencing, right? And so it's not like I wanted to learn about it or read about it. And I certainly didn't care what anyone else had to say about it. I saw through all of that by this point. And I had reached a point where I started saying, okay, enough. I want to experience the truth of gender so that I can know for myself. But like I said, this was a process for me. So please don't feel like you need to rush towards some presumed finish line, because it's probably going to take some time for this question to take hold of your gender exploration. I mean, for some of you, you might be able to jump right in and it works immediately, and that's great. But for others, you might benefit from taking a slightly different angle into it. So you could ask yourself things like, okay, how does the truth of gender reveal itself within the natural world? And you might look at the trees and the rivers and the flowers and ask, okay, where's the truth of gender in all of this? Or maybe you could ask, where is the ground of gender from within which all things have grown out of? And if you find yourself getting frustrated or confused, then perfect. That's exactly what's supposed to happen, right? It's supposed to frazzle your mind in such a way where you realize that you don't actually know what the truth is, at least not in the way that you thought you did. And then as soon as you start to bump up against this I don't know part of the process, well, that means that you have entered into a much deeper and more intimate relationship with gender. And then the process evolves from there. And so don't forget, every time that you think you know, you've got it figured out, that's your cue to let go and sink even deeper into this inquiry process. So for now, I just want to put this question on your radar. And I want to give you this invitation and just say, hey, maybe you could sit with this for a while. You could ponder it, feel it, you could become it, right? And please don't forget that this is a lighthearted, playful, curious thing, right? Because this is about you connecting to the truth of who you are, right? And even though that can feel daunting at times, the bottom line is that really this entire path and the fact that you're walking it, this is cause for celebration. And if this inquiry process is really resonating with you and you want additional support in it, then I want you to consider joining me for the Remapping Gender Workshop. So this is a 1-hour guided exploration into the ground of gender, which I designed specifically to help point you in the direction of the truth of gender. There's a link in the description, and I can't wait to see what you'll discover and how it impacts you. All right, my friend, that's all I've got. I'll see you in the next one.